on Sky News Australia. This is the Rita Panahi Show.
Good evening and welcome to the Rita Panahi Show. Coming up tonight, tax revenue and jobs under threat as mining and gas executives warn the Albanese government that red, black and green tape are jeopardising investment in the sector. Professor Ian Plimer will join me shortly to discuss that crucial issue. Elon Musk and X have a big win against the eSafety Commissioner in the federal court. Australia's Jewish community speaks out against the Albanese government's betrayal at the UN. Dr. Colin Rubinstein joins me later in the hour. And why is Prince Harry reportedly crying? Kinsey Schofield with the latest celebrity and royal news. And talking about lefties losing it, tonight we feature a Eurovision extravaganza, including this little communist doom goblin.
Here to show that we think it is outrageous and inexcusable for Eurovision to let Israel participate while committing a genocide.
Let's bring in Sky News contributor Prue McSween. Prue, it's stunning to see Greta so effortlessly go from science expert to Middle East expert while wagging years of school. She really is quite an impressive young woman.
She just sort of comes out of the woodwork and lays claim to know everything about everything, when in fact she's totally unemployable. She's got questionable intelligence, and she is a goblin. She's a bloody public nuisance, absolutely.
Well, you know what? I would ignore her input, except she has such a profound influence on young people. And we've seen so many young people suffering from things called climate anxiety now. People are in treatment. I've spoken to psychologists on this program who are dealing with these traumatised kids who've been convinced by the likes of Greta that the world's ending and they have no future and that they're experiencing all this trauma unnecessarily, so we do have to pay attention to what she's up to. But let's talk about a significant win today for Elon Musk and X at the federal court, where a temporary order by Australia's eSafety Commissioner, Julian Grant, to block Australians from viewing footage of the alleged terrorist stabbing attack of Sydney Bishop Marmari Emmanuel, that has now been refused. Prue, this request from the eSafety Commissioner wasn't just blocking Australians, this was wanting the footage to have be banned globally, a takedown order with global implications, which is absurd. The power trip this woman must be on. Barrister Brett Walker, representing X, told the court that the reasons supplied by the eSafety Commissioner to support this takedown order looked informal under the Administrative Appeals Tribunal Act, and he also said there are strong reasons to doubt the validity of the notice. This is, again, it shocks me that so many in the media are enthusiastically supporting what amounts to censorship here.
Well, this is the problem. It's a huge play by this government. We're seeing it in South Australia as well, where they want to control everything we see, read and hear. And I am so glad that this judge has knocked this out of the park. This woman, Julian Grant, has a vendetta, as we know, against Twitter, which was her former employer. And the fact that she was going to try and impose her views on the world, and that's what it would have happened, as the judge said, was totally insane.
Oh, absolutely. And as Elon Musk himself pointed out a couple of weeks ago, you could have any government anywhere in the world have a similar order requesting footage be taken down, and every country would have to abide by it if this set some sort of a precedent. I mean, that's just madness. And we should also point out, as it was pointed out in court, that the alleged victim in all this, the Bishop Emmanuel, doesn't want this footage to be banned from social media or from X. So that was also something that was mentioned in court. Prue, South Australian Premier Peter Malinauskas has announced his government is examining a ban on children under the age of 14 from having social media accounts. He posted this on social media site X. This nation-leading move will see former Chief Justice of the High Court, Robert French AC, tasked with examining the legal, regulatory and technological pathways for the state government to impose a ban, while also giving due consideration to the constitutional framework. Two things here, Prue. One, it sounds unenforceable. I don't know how they're going to enforce this for kids who can run rings around all of us when it comes to social media and technology. And two, shouldn't this be a parental decision as opposed to a government one?
Well, these are the grand gestures that Labor loves to make. And as you say, it's totally unenforceable. How can they possibly do it? And secondly, we are sick of parents being disempowered. I mean, we have this situation where we are seeing kids, boasting and posting, fights and things like that at school. And part of the problem is that teachers are not allowed to discipline children anymore and supervise them to the extent that when I was going to school, I would never have dared do something like this. So we have parents disempowered. They can't complain about the fact that there's no discipline and rules in schools. And we have, this nanny state situation where the politicians think they can go into a kid's bedroom and tell them and determine what they can and cannot watch. It's not going to happen. We do know that social media has very dangerous implications when it comes to young minds. We've witnessed that with radicalised kids, etc. But in the end, it's up to the parents to impose restrictions on their kids. Instead of trying to be a friend with your kid, take the phone away. If they're going into their bedroom at night, they do not need their device with them, for goodness sake. So, parents need to start parenting.
Absolutely, and I wouldn't be against having some sort of a ban in schools, in class and lunchtime and recess. Just if you're in school, you don't have your phone unless it's some sort of an emergency. I think that would be widely supported, and that's something you could actually enforce. But
Exactly.
yeah, what they're talking about here, I think, is fantasy land. Now, it's taken a while, but finally some acknowledgement that the way Victoria Police treated anti-lockdown and vaccine mandate protesters during COVID was a violent use of excessive force. In the county court, Judge Liz Gaynor ruled police were the aggressors during an anti-lockdown protest in May 2021. And in her stinging judgment, the judge ruled that the arrests were unlawful, and she called the response from the police immediate and violent, saying, "I'm satisfied that police were the aggressors in the situation and they employed unjustified violence." Prue, there are now calls for the police to be perhaps investigated and charged. And I think we're going to hear a lot more about this because these cases are now finally before the courts and the evidence is being examined, including body cam footage.
Well, I'm not an apologist for the police, and I think they have totally overstepped the mark, and they were aggressors and incredibly violent. But we have to point the finger at Andrews, the Premier, because it's a psychological thing almost that he empowered them. He was ruling that state with an unreasonable iron hand. He was demanding measures that were absolutely an infringement on people's human rights. And I suspect, because the police force in Victoria was and still remains a very big political arm of the premiers of the state, and they were empowered by Andrews to do this aggressive enforcement. So he's, to me, as culpable as the police who did seriously overstep the mark.
Oh, absolutely. We need a royal commission with everybody to answer questions, including the state premiers. Now, the budget, you're not going to escape a budget question, Prue. I know you thought you were going to, but it's tomorrow night, and the Australian Financial Review notes that Treasurer Jim Chalmers is breaking from the market-based economic model favoured by the Hawke and Keating governments that helped deliver years of national prosperity. John Keogh writes, Jim Chalmers is ripping up the economic textbook. The Labor Treasurer is embracing a bigger role for government to direct capital and allocate resources. But Prue, how can a government that, let's be frank here, has next to zero business experience pick out winning projects to back with our money?
Well, we've already seen that they are totally inept at it with this future made in Australia, and we have, the $1 billion into the solar panels when we know there's a glut of solar panels and that China and many other countries can produce them much cheaper than we could possibly ever do. And then we've got this very questionable tendering process over the PSI quantum allocation of another $1 billion. I mean, they're not demonstrating that they have any prowess at doing this. And as you say, I mean, Chalmers and co have never had any business experience. They don't understand market forces. Keating and Hawke certainly did, and that's where this country was, really reinvigorated. And these fools, these arrogant fools who think that they are going to be able to pick the winners with our money, and with, of course, the union power of the super fund money, which, God help all these people who are in industry funds, because your money is going to be invested in loser businesses. And this country's going to go down the toilet. And he keeps saying, Chalmers, that he knows better than the RBA that we are going to have inflation down to 2 or 3% by Christmas. Give us a break. I mean, the man is, he did work for Wayne Swan. Wasn't he the universe's greatest treasure? And he never, ever produced a surplus. And this is the guy who worked for him. So God help Australia is all I can say.
Yeah, I think Wayne Swan promised us 4 surpluses, but I don't think he actually delivered one at all.
No.
But yes, we'll see how we go here. But it's just, we do not need an expansionary budget in the current environment. The last thing we want is the Reserve Bank spooked with inflationary pressure and rates remaining high or even going up further. Now, speaking of Paul Keating there, I don't know if you caught this story in the Sunday Telegraph. Annette Sharp reporting there that the former Labor Prime Minister, who is now 80 years old, has found love with a 30-something Polish waitress. Got to hand it to Paul Keating. No one ever said he was boring, Prue.
No, well, there must be some life in the old boy yet, unless they just wind clocks together and talk about art or something. I don't know. But good on him. At least it might keep him off the media trail and, throwing grenades at various people as he loves to do. And of course, cozying up to China. It's interesting that, does Poland and China get on? I'm not quite sure.
Well, yes. The less he says about China, the better, I think, for all of us. Yes. Now, let's go to the US, where a small number of students at Duke University staged a walkout, a very loud walkout, in protest of Jerry Seinfeld's appearance at their commencement ceremony. You can see them there getting up and leaving. I doubt Jerry really was too fussed about this. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
My point is we're embarrassed about things we should be proud of and proud of things we should be embarrassed about. So on my staff in the 90s, we had a lot of Harvard guys. They were fantastic, but I could never understand why these guys were so embarrassed about being from Harvard. They would never talk about it. They would never mention it. I'm not talking about Harvard now. I'm talking about the way it used to be. You're never going to believe this. Harvard used to be a great place to go to school.
He told them not to be ashamed of their privilege and to maintain a sense of humour. And I think that's very good advice indeed.
Well, definitely. But clearly they were humourless. And if they didn't, really celebrate the fact that Jerry Seinfeld, who's one of the greatest comedians and, I think social anthropologists we've seen, I think it's pretty pathetic that they walked out. Just shows how juvenile and how dumb they really are.
Oh, absolutely. But I think it was, with Duke University, a small but loud minority. When you look at the numbers who actually got up and walked out, a few of them had banners and they looked They were in the dozens, not their hundreds. So I guess that's a positive sign. Prue McSween, thank you so much. Joining me now is renowned geologist, Professor Ian Plimer. Ian, we've had gas mining giants issuing the Albanese government a budget eve warning. They're saying that huge tax revenue contributions and the regional jobs the sector provides, they're at risk unless this restrictive red, black, green tape is removed. What are the chances that the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, will heed their calls?
Well, he's got very little choice. This has now become a political matter. A couple of years ago, the outgoing Japanese ambassador warned the government about investment in gas in Australia. And the time taken for approvals, the massive amount of red, green, black and blue tape from the UN that gives massive investment uncertainty. And investment wasn't made because of the uncertainty. Now the chickens have come home. Now we've got a gas shortage. And that means that the knock-on effect is with making fertilisers and making plastics and foundries operating and even green steel and making hydrogen. So this has been coming for a long, long time. Now, I have to declare an interest. I'm the chairman of Senex, which is a gas company in Eastern Australia. It's a company with POSCO, the Korean steel giant. I was with POSCO last week in Korea. They expressed huge concern about the time taken for approvals and the fact that our government has just locked gas development in red tape and black tape such that it's impossible to do anything. And in Senex, we want to increase our production from 20 to 60 petajoules. This would help the problems in Eastern Australia. Now, the government is a hindrance to gas development in Australia. It's not helping. And they should have done this years ago. So they've killed off coal, they've killed off nuclear, there's very little hydro, wind and solar are unreliable. All we've got left is gas. And this is being totally and absolutely destroyed by the federal government.
Is it just the federal government or is it the state governments who are a real hindrance when it comes to increasing gas production in this country?
In Queensland, the state government is a little bit more cooperative than in Victoria or in New South Wales. And you have to remember that gas is produced from rural areas. There are very few jobs left in rural areas. Almost all of primary industry has been destroyed in rural areas. And gas creates a lot of jobs. And in the case of Senex, the jobs are in places like Wandoan and Roma. These jobs are absolutely vital because there is little employment in rural Australia. So it's a national issue which has been totally ignored for ideological reasons by the government. It's been ignored because gas is a fossil fuel. It's been ignored because they want to create unreliable energy, which is not going to make plastics. It's not going to make fertilisers. It's not going to solve any problems.
Now, Ian, one of your favourites, Minister for Climate Change, Chris Bowen, he has taken to X, the social media site, to boast about a surge in electric vehicle novated leases. He says it's all thanks to Labor's EV tax cut. But is this really something to boast about? Isn't it more market manipulation to push EVs on to people who are now going into debt to lease an asset that is going to be almost worthless at the end of that lease in some cases?
Well, that's the case. EVs lose their value quicker than anything. EVs have an awful track record of performance and resale. And Mr. Bowen should look at what's happening in the UK and in Europe. And there's a massive glut of EVs. People are moving away from EVs and back to the time-proven internal combustion engines. We've got tens of thousands of EVs lined up on wharves in Europe. These have come from China. Places like Bremerhaven, you can't actually have any more EVs there. And in Germany, the EV construction has actually slowed down. We have so many EVs floating around that people don't want to buy. And they don't want to buy them for the right reasons. They're too expensive. They depreciate at a very, very fast rate. They catch a light. They can't go very far. And if you're in the case of someone like Budget, who are renting out cars, they're totally useless. And what Budget has done is sell tens of thousands of the EVs because they cannot run a business. Actually renting out EVs, leasing EVs is the same sort of business. It will only operate if it's subsidised, and that is with your money.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, if there's such a fantastic product, you wouldn't need all these programs and subsidies and penalties on high emission cars to try to cajole people into buying these. Now, it's all very confusing because whilst we've got Chris Bowen pushing EVs very heavily, in Germany, the lefties are protesting against EVs. Protesters are opposed to the expansion of a Tesla plant in a town near Berlin. On Friday, they clashed with police. Some of them even attempted to storm the electric vehicle manufacturing facility. Let's have a look. And what is going on? I thought the environmentalists were all loving EVs, or are they finally realising that they're not that environmentally friendly if you actually look at what goes into them?
Well, summer is coming on in Europe, in Germany, and you can see from the way people were dressed, it was warm. Many of those people have not got thick overcoats on. So this is the time for the anarcho-Marxists to start demonstrating. And they demonstrate against anything. Now, that Grünheide factory is in East Germany. East Germany needs the jobs. East Germany is still recovering from communism, which destroyed the economy. So here we've got people objecting to actually owning a car, to having freedom, to stopping the average person being able to drive when and where they want to. They want to be pleased that Germany actually has Tesla into that country because companies like BMW and Volkswagen and Mercedes and Porsche are actually cutting down the amount of production. They've been very successful with their internal combustion engines, but with their EVs, they've actually lost a lot of money. So the German people should be very pleased that someone is investing in EVs because, after all, EVs are meant to be clean, green vehicles. These people should be cheering. They shouldn't be demonstrating.
Well, they're not cheering. You saw from that footage there, they were like storming the barricades. Also, conflict in Queensland with the LNP, the Liberal National Party. The different factions there have got a showdown coming up between the moderates and the Conservatives at the party's annual state conference. And the big issue seems to be in the parliamentary party's support of Labor's 75% emission reduction target by 2035, a very bold target indeed. Rank and file party members are said to be absolutely irate with that, as are several federal MPs. How do you see this clash resolving? It seems like they're determined to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory here. Have they not learnt anything from the rabble we've got down here in Victoria?
Well, there's something in the water in Queensland because the Labor Party's having a massive fight at present between the loopy left trying to ease out the right, and they have agreements where various positions go to the left and right. They're having a massive fight. And the LNP are having a massive fight. And in the LNP's case, it's a death wish. If you want to lose an election, show that you've got some division. Now, we have now the LNP is saying, look, we don't want to have net zero on the political agenda. We want to be the same as the Labor clowns. And so we're going to have the same policy. And that means that you can't vote us out on net zero grounds. They need to stand up and have some principle. They need to say, we are different. We don't want to send Queensland broke. We have Queensland, an energy exporting state. We need to actually use coal and use gas. So we have people, and I wouldn't call them the moderates, I'd say those with common sense in their LNP are actually trying to stop those who are siding with the loopy left and saying, well, yes, we should go down the net zero path. And the people who have got common sense in the LNP are saying, we want to be a party where we are different. We don't want to have a twiddle-dee and twiddle-dum election. We want to have an election based on two different economic models. One is a socialist model and the other is a capitalist model.
Well, you're absolutely right. And we saw that federally, where the Morrison government decided that they didn't want to have climate change, net zero on the agenda, so they signed up to it and then they lost because they couldn't actually argue about the most important issue in that election, which was cost of living. And obviously energy prices are a huge factor in that. Professor Plimer, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Still to come, Lefties losing it, and it's a special Eurovision edition of Lefties, plus the Labor Party's betrayal of the Jewish community. Dr. Colin Rubenstein joins me next. Welcome back. Now it's time for Lefties Losing It. And before we get to the Eurovision extravaganza I've promised you, let's start with another neo-pronoun lesson. Do you ever feel like your gender is a star? Well, that's completely valid.
We literally live in a capitalist hellhole. If somebody doesn't have the correct words to express how their gender identity feels, and the best way they can describe that is, it feels like a star, my gender feels like a star, okay, valid, sure. I really don't see the problem at all. My only asterisk, or like my only little note, is if you use a lot of neo-pronouns interchangeably, and this is not to crap on neo-pronouns, I'm reading a lot about gender studies, I have been lately, I'm having my own little gender identity crisis. Neo-pronouns might be something that helps me personally, and that's a different TikTok for a different time. The point is, neo-pronouns are valid, but if you use a lot of them interchangeably depending on how you're feeling that day, be patient with people. Rapid change like that can be difficult for a lot of people, and especially people with learning disabilities or other disabilities. So just be patient, maybe work on ways that you can express the pronouns that you're feeling that day, name tag, bracelet, earrings, different things. You are still incredibly valid, you just maybe need to be a little bit patient while the rest of the world is catching up.
Yeah, you're so incredibly valid. Just remember that. Now to the Eurovision contest. Remember when it was just a joyful freak show of song and dance? Well, now it's just become a freak show, a hateful, anti-Israeli one where one lone performer representing Israel was mercilessly bullied by the crowd who booed her, by fellow contestants, and even commie troll Greta Thunberg.
Here to show that we think it is outrageous and inexcusable for Eurovision to let Israel participate while committing a genocide. Yes, it's a song contest where Israel, a country that is currently committing a genocide in Gaza, are allowed to compete. Yeah, that is a very clear example that does say that when a country accepts in a way that, when a country behaves in a way that is unacceptable, then Eurovision excludes them. So why not Israel?
She really is a miserable little doom goblin, isn't she? And how wonderful to see her go from climate expert to Middle East expert. And she really believes she's saving the world by encouraging kids to waste their lives getting themselves arrested, this time for trying to stop a woman singing.
I think they should be everywhere, and once again, young people are leading the way, showing the world how we should react to this.
But it wasn't just Greta. The Israeli performer Eden Golan was also bullied by other contestants, including this 30-something child representing Greece, pretending to fall asleep when media asked Eden a question.
Yes, very happy. How do you feel after reaching the final when the situation in Israel, you know how it is?
Well, I feel I'm so overwhelmed with emotions. It's truly such an honor to be here on stage.
And among the most virulent anti-Israel performers was the non-binary witch Bambi Thug. By the way, that is not me having a go at her. That's how she describes herself.
Do you know what makes me special? I'm a queer. And I'm a witch!
Well, despite backing a boycott of the event, Bambi Thug decided to participate herself. Of course, she didn't want to pay a personal price for her activism and miss out on Eurovision. But what did she do when Israel made it to the finals?
I cried with my team.
Yes, there were tears from that lefty, but there was also demented joy. I guess that's what this is. Yes, the Irish lass cried and laughed, and she cried some more when Israel ended up doing particularly well with the public vote, not the jury vote for obvious reasons, but the public voted for talent, not a hateful, confused witch. And so we saw the lefty lose it again.
I don't even care anymore. The thing that makes this as contestants, the community behind this, the love and the power and the support of all of us is what is making change. And the world has spoken. The queers are coming. Non-binaries.
And the world did speak and backed the Israeli performer who got the maximum 12 votes from the public from countries such as Australia, Belgium, Finland, France, Germany, Spain, Sweden, UK, Portugal, Switzerland, Italy. The list goes on. But the jury votes did not go to Israel. Indeed, shamefully, Australia's jury votes went to the demonic crybaby witch. Joining me now is Dr. Colin Rubenstein, Executive Director of the Australia, Israel and Jewish Affairs Council. Colin, the Albanese government has overturned decades of foreign policy bipartisanship with a UN vote supporting a resolution urging recognition of Palestine as a state. The Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, claims this will advance peace efforts. What's your response to that argument?
Well, this is a very disturbing decision that Australia has taken. It's confused, it's short-sighted, and it's counterproductive approach in terms of our historical bipartisan commitment to Israel, but also in terms of promoting what they claim they want, and that is towards a negotiated two-state outcome. It effectively rewards terrorism and violence. It's basically saying that mass murder, rape, kidnapping, hostage-taking, these are acceptable and effective tools to achieve legitimacy and international support. As Hamas, of course, is very pleased by this decision, as is the Palestinian Authority, which also needs to undergo a profound change in its culture if it's to be able to be in a position down the track to have an effective role in the governing of a potential Palestinian state in the future. So, Rita, this is, many have said it's a completely unprincipled decision by Australia, joining our enemies at the United Nations, the Flat Earth Organisation, which in the process of passing this resolution further dents its credibility and enhances its tradition, long-standing tradition of extreme anti-Israel bias. But it's also very unprincipled in terms of ditching Israel. I think it's very worrying in terms of inflaming tensions within Australia at a time when anti-Semitism has surged around the world and in this country as well. We see it on our streets, we see it on our universities, and for the government to be taking this position at this time, I think is disturbing for Australia's basic national interest because, as you well know, we're siding with our enemies here and ditching our allies, principally, of course, the United States, but also countries at least who had the decency to abstain, be they the United Kingdom, Canada, and others. So we've aligned ourselves with Iran and Russia and China and North Korea, and we've put ourselves on the wrong side of the ledger. We've done nothing to advance genuine possibility of a resolution of this current war which is what it is, and certainly nothing in terms of advancing the prospects of long-term reconciliation in the Middle East between Israel and the Palestinians.
Why do you think the Albanese government has come to this position? It is such a significant departure from what we have seen for decades. Is it domestic politics that's motivating this decision? Are they looking at those electorates where there are large Muslim populations and worried about what the backlash there might be at coming elections? What's motivating this decision?
Well, you've said it, and I'm not going to disagree with a good judge like you, but many have commented on the political opportunism at stake and the electoral numbers. It's well known that Labor, both left and right members, are looking at the attitudes and ideology and interests of large numbers in their electorates. It's not a secret at all. This is certainly driving the politics, but also an ideological stance by many members. We see it very clearly in toxic views taken by so many Greens and even Teals. But this ideological hostility to Israel that's developed over the decades, that somehow it's an illegal entity, it's a colonial entity, it's a newcomer, it's perpetrating, terrible atrocities, war crimes and all the rest of it, which are completely untrue, in many respects pure and utter blood libel and historically absolutely ignorant. But there is a strong dose of ideology, of commitment by some members, the anti-Israel faction of the Labor Party, as opposed to those who are more familiar with the history and more familiar with Australia's values and traditions and bipartisan stance and the history of their own party, going back to Doc Evatt through to Bob Hawke and Julia Gillard, which understands Israel's situation, is committed to Israel's viability and future, at the same time being committed to a genuine reconciliation and two-state peace through negotiation, which is what mainstream parties still support, which is the position, I think, well articulated by the United States at the General Assembly just a few days ago. That is the way to go. And ironically, I mean, the verbal gymnastics we've heard from the Foreign Minister on the weekend, it really defy understanding and imagination. So Australia is a mixed position, I think, is, as many have said, it's shameful, it trashes the bipartisan support for peace in the Middle East and Israel, which exemplifies the same democratic values and traditions that we uphold. And we've joined the jackals, as former Senator Monahan said back in the days of the 70s, of the Zionism racism resolution, which we should remember historically, its rebuttal and rejection had a lot to do with the leadership of the Hawke Labor government at the time, to the extent that for a while it was called the rebuttal of that.
Colin, we're a long way from...
It was called the Australian Resolution.
We're a long way from the Hawke Labor government with this current lot. Things have changed dramatically and not for the better, unfortunately. Dr. Colin Rubenstein, thank you so much for your time this evening. Appreciate it. Still to come, Harry breaks down in tears as King Charles awards Prince William a military honour. And why are Harry and Meghan in Nigeria? Kinsey Schofield's up next. Welcome back. You're watching the Rita Panahi Show. Let's bring in celebrity and royal reporter Kinsey Schofield. Kinsey, let's talk about Harry. Tom Quinn has claimed that Prince Harry was reduced to tears when he heard King Charles had bestowed a new military honour on his brother Prince William. Surely not. He wouldn't. Why would he be in tears over something like this? He should be overjoyed that his brother's being honoured.
Well, allegedly, this is the same department that Prince Harry served under. So this would be a burn to Prince Harry. I'm sure that all he has to do is log on to Zoom and talk to his local California therapist after dealing with something like this. But they do feel like this might have been an intentional snub, considering the fact that Prince Harry had just landed in the UK when the palace announced it. And the palace did expect for Prince Harry to land in the UK that day. You know, I think that if he's a man that's willing to cry over something like this, I wouldn't want him under, you know, as my leader anyway. But a particularly interesting headline coming from Tom Quinn about Prince Harry in tears.
Yes, and this may have left him in tears as well, because we know King Charles declined to see Harry when they were both in London last week, but he did find time to meet up with David Beckham, according to the Times. They said the former England football captain met the King for a private meeting. There were no pictures, there was no press about it. But they did note that the report of the meeting could make uncomfortable reading for the Duke of Sussex. You don't say, Kinsey.
Exactly. Well, first of all, I want to stress that David Beckham waited in line for over 12 hours to pay respects to Queen Elizabeth II after she passed. Prince Harry refused to see her days before her death. So I think that that's important to point out, that the Beckhams clearly have much more respect for the monarchy than the Markles. But also there have been reports recently that statement that Prince Harry released about the king not being able to see him was not necessarily the honest truth. Friends of King Charles came out in his defense over the weekend, saying that not only was the king willing to see him, but was never formally approached about a meeting. The king authorized Prince Harry the possibility to stay at one of the royal residences, and Prince Harry turned it down ultimately and opted to stay at a hotel. So interesting new developments coming out of there. Maybe we were giving Prince Harry too much credit by taking his word.
Yes, we should have learned our lesson by now. Now, let's talk about the Nigerian tour that's underway. Harry and Meghan, I don't know if this is a royal tour. They're not working royals. Are they? Well, they're not politicians or pop stars. What exactly are they doing touring Nigeria in the first place, Kinsey?
Allegedly, they're courting Nigeria for a future Invictus Games, but it's just all a bunch of PR. Right. I mean, you've seen Meghan's dramatic wardrobe changes throughout it, her insisting that this is her country. Thank you for welcoming me to my country. Now, 43% of Nigerians are living below the poverty level. Another 25 are vulnerable to falling in that category. There are horrible stories that come out of Nigeria about, you know, the mutilation of little girls, child brides, and abusive child labor. So they don't care about Harry and Meghan. They don't care what Meghan Markle's wearing or that she's wearing the jewelry of her deceased mother-in-law. They just don't want to be forced to marry the Harry next door neighbor at the age of 12. So it just shows you the complete lack of self-awareness that Harry and Meghan have.
Absolutely, and I've got a feeling that we're not going to hear any of those issues you mentioned raised. The treatment meted out to young girls, the child brides, all of that. I can't imagine it's going to be something that Meghan is going to be advocating. She did call it my country. She's revealed she's 43% Nigerian, and she was very grateful to be home.
What they define as a Nigerian woman is brave, resilient, courageous, powerful, and every single moment that I hear anyone so far talk about what it means to be a Nigerian woman, it is the most flattering thing to be in that company, to be in your company. So, yes, it's been really eye-opening and humbling to be able to know more about my heritage and to be able to know this is just the beginning of that discovery.
There you go, Kinsey. She's brave and resilient and all those wonderful qualities, but not everyone is happy that Harry and Meghan are in town.
Look, Nigerians are dying. Everybody is frustrated over economic hardship, and Prince Harry is coming all the way from British Dynasty to visit Nigeria. See, let me tell you, if you seek my own opinion and other people's opinion, in fact, conduct opinion poll is a wasting of resources.
To me, it's not a welcome idea. That's the truth.
You mentioned Meghan's fashion choices. She's drawn some criticism for the frequent outfit changes and some of the fashion statements. Is she trying to, I don't know, have her Diana fantasy with this tour? Because we know, we've heard from her childhood friends that she was a fan.
Well, yeah, and I just want to stress, Thomas Markle said he was surprised to find out that Meghan Markle was 43% Nigerian and said she's 100% Californian. And there are still a lot of people that remember when Meghan's Hollywood headshot said that she was 100% Caucasian as well. So you do you, girl, whatever. I do think that she is trying to look like a royal again. I think that the ultimate objective is to win that respect back that they've lost and they've become a joke in not only the United States, but in the UK. I imagine it's similar in Australia. And so they need the glitz, the glam, these photos that remind people of why they fell in love with them in the first place. But unfortunately, they've fallen too far. We're not going to forget about their behavior to their employees and the dying Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. I think that people have made up their minds about them.
Oh, indeed. But Meghan was eager to praise her husband for being smart after he spoke to Nigerian school children about mental health and how it's okay to have a bad day. I've got to say, though, Kinsey, this is all a bit too much. It's a bit too rich because you mentioned some of the challenges in this country. They're real challenges. Here you've got this pampered prince telling kids who have got all sorts of issues he could never even fathom, and he's telling them about hardship.
Right. And my favorite part is when she gets up, she grabs the mic and she says, "Do you see why I married him?" And everybody cheers. And then she says, "It's so inspiring because he speaks the truth." Rita, he would not know the truth if it bit him on his frostbitten todger. Like the irony. I mean, these people are insane. I just like who is standing near them going, "Oh, that's going to be amazing." Absolutely, say that. They have 2 brand new publicists. Fire them immediately.
Yeah, really? No, you created all sorts of imagery there, Kinsey. That's disturbing. So let's move on to something else. There's a concerning trend on social media of celebrities being named and shamed for not being sufficiently anti-Israel. There's lists going around, obviously, targets like Gal Gadot, who's Wonder Woman, who's Israeli, so obviously she's in the bad books. But a surprising number of celebrities are on this list, like Billie Eilish, who have made pro-Palestinian statements in the past or statements calling for a ceasefire. But to the activists, their statements aren't strong enough. Their condemnation, their boycotts aren't strong enough. Who else is on this list?
Yeah, I mean, you just saw Selena Gomez and Taylor Swift. Selena Gomez has absolutely gotten in trouble for some of her comments about Palestine. But I think that these are people that have all of this time to raise hell because they are unemployed. If they had jobs and had to pay real bills, they wouldn't have time to riot with George Soros's Hollywood Extras program. And for most celebrities, that status as a celebrity requires them to do jobs like tour, film, movies, TV shows, audition, and be productive-ish members of society. And so, no, Taylor Swift is not going to stop in the middle of her Eras tour and complain about what's going on in Gaza because she knows that she's got a job to do. And honestly, she might alienate a significant amount of her audience if she does that. So this just feels like people that are bored.
If you ask me, celebrities are too outspoken on political issues. I'd rather hear less from them, not more. Kinsey Schofield, thank you for your time this evening. That's it from me. Newsnight is up next. I'll see you at 11 tomorrow. Good night.